Welcome to the V2V podcast. This is part of our Survivor series. My name is Aurelius. Some people call me Marcus, but that's neither here nor there. What we're doing today is talking to Liz Ianelli, a survivor. She goes by survivor.nineninethree. She has a growing hashtag called iseeyousurvivor that's important to note. And Liz is also a licensed clinical social worker who has some expertise in survivorship on a clinical level. And she is an expert in what you might call the rehabilitation of people who've gone through the troubled teen industry, and so she has a lot of knowledge to share with us about the industry itself and its effects on young people, now adults who have been through these programs. So I'd like to introduce Liz Ianelli. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
This is kind of a big deal for me. I think considering your recent inclusion in a big profile in the New York Times last week, that I think caught everybody's attention, and it had a kind of a ripple effect in this world, which I think is a really good thing.
Yeah.
But aside from that, I'd like to get into kind of exactly what we're talking about with the so-called troubled teen industry, and let you give your definition of what exactly that is and what we're talking about.
Sure. Just the first thing I'd like to note is ending up on the cover of the New York Times was very bittersweet for me because, I went into the program screaming. I came out of my program screaming, and I've been screaming for 21 years, okay? So it's great that we got the exposure and, we are here and we are here now, but the bitter part is that it took that long and it took that massive level of effort to capture the world's attention about what we've already known as the adults now who went through this as children. So it's a great thing, but it saddens me that we had to take it that far to capture the world's attention. Now that we have it, my view of the troubled teen industry, people ask me a lot, well, what is it? And it depends on who I'm telling. My definition of it, or perception of the troubled teen industry, is that it is a form of human trafficking on domestic soil. People hear the word human trafficking and they automatically think the sex trade or young children and sex workers, but it, to me, is a national and international system of trafficking children, early teens or preteens, some are older, and it's not federally regulated. The systems, they have lots of names. It could be a wilderness program, therapeutic boarding school, reform school. They can call themselves whatever they want, but it's essentially a rogue, defunct system of facilities that prey on parents and families who are in crisis. And some programs offer very exclusive opportunities to parents when they are desperate. So they basically want, it's the troubled teen industry itself. It's a $2 billion industry. So I look at it as a business, and the business model is that we will collect children who are troubled, which is on a spectrum, okay? And
Right.
We will promise you that we will return them to you shiny and new and rehabilitated and reformed, and you will get a chance to outsource parenting because you're obviously out of options and they know it. And for a simple, amount of money, which is tremendous for some families, we can do the job for you and we can do it better. And it is, it's smoke and mirrors. They're selling you a lemon, but you don't know it until your child returns and they're not the same.
Right.
And
in a lot of these cases, do the parents sign away their parental rights to the schools too?
Yes.
That's
yes.
my understanding is that they're given legal custody.
It depends on the program. So here's what I say when they sign over. Essentially, parents in duress and in crisis. By the time you meet these people who, the front office is what I call it, the first facade, you're signing paperwork, parents saying that, yes, you can restrain my child. Yes, I understand that this program may use behavioral modification techniques that they have found to be evidence-based. Your child may be confronted by peers to help them understand their behaviors. They word it in a way that the parents don't understand, that they're not so much signing over a legal guardianship, but they are consenting to the fact that these programs have freedom to treat their child in any way that they feel necessary to give the parent the product that they want back.
Right. So they're signing what would be commonly referred to as like treatment consent forms.
Correct.
Which are legally binding, considering
yes.
that the teenager doesn't have the legal standing to make their own decisions, in a sense, because the law looks at the parents to be able to decide what is best for their child, regardless of whatever it is the treatment might actually be.
Right. So the parent is thinking they're signing regular paperwork that is necessary for their child to enter the program, and what they don't always realize in that moment is that they're saying, here's my child, do what by any means necessary, do what I'm paying you for, which is to fix them. So
right.
Yes,
right.
You know,
and the more unconventional, harsh abuse that goes on is oftentimes, to my understanding, not really disclosed. It's more of a general, we're going to take care of your child kind of a situation. These things aren't necessarily enumerated, like, for instance, we may get into later, the idea of wrapping your kid up in rugs tied with duct tape.
Right, like me. So my
that's
parents,
not in the brochure. Right.
Yeah, my parents didn't sign a form like, hey, it's totally cool, wrap my daughter up in a blanket, leave her there for days, feed her like a dog, feel free to beat the shit out of her whenever you feel like it, feel free to make her feel like a horrible person, I want you to punish her in ways that, are illegal, I want her to have less rights than a prisoner, please make sure she lives in squalor and make sure that you can call her a whore anytime you want. That's not what they signed.
Right.
You know
Now,
so it's like,
definitely, what struck me and continues to is this idea that for whatever reason, through manipulation or coercion or outright lying to parents and the public, is that the things that have been documented to have been done by facilities with children would never be tolerated, and generally aren't accepted practices with adults. Like even in prisons, people aren't treated that way. They would never be allowed to treat other adults like the way that these places treat children. It's it's pretty amazing, really. Like, it blows my mind every time I think about it. Like, how in the world can we treat kids like this in ways that are totally unacceptable in the treatment of adults?
Right, exactly.
It makes no sense.
Right, and it's false marketing, because the programs say, like, I can speak for my family. My parents knew that there would be a blackout phase where we would not have communication. But they were told that they were given very good reasons why. They need to be immersed in the program. We need to kind of break this sick relationship that the two of you have, we need them to ourselves to kind of get them straightened up enough so that they can communicate with you better. So my parents were, like all parents, given the illusion that these general terms that they were saying, like, yes, I mean, they want the help, so they're not going to say, well, what does behavioral modification mean? By the time they're signing that paper, they're in so much crisis and so desperate for anyone that can help them, they're going to sign away. You know, it's
right.
If you've ever bought a home or sold a home, you just keep signing and signing and signing. You don't even care what you're signing. Just give me the house or get rid of the house. Like, that's kind of where you're at, you know?
Sure. And I have some background in adult treatment. I'm a certified drug and alcohol tech, and I've worked in residential treatment for adults. And
right.
there are some circumstances, initially, especially people going through detox or getting acclimated to a particular environment, where it's beneficial to provide these kind of I don't like to call them blackouts, but restrictions on phones, restrictions on where you can necessarily go during the day.
Right,
initially.
right.
And because what the idea is to focus on
you know,
and getting better and a new way of living, a new way of thinking, in the sense that, look, we understand where you've been, and we know that you came here voluntarily, which is important. I often would tell people that who were reluctant once they were talking to me about the idea that, look, we need to punch a code to get into the place, but that door swings wide open on the way out. Like, anybody can leave at any time for any reason, and so you don't have to feel like you're in any way trapped.
Right, and that predominantly, that field is most often, like, the actual drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs. There's a spectrum to it, but again, most, you know, adults that are in those situations have the right to self-determine. They can leave whenever they want. And the phone restrictions and your whereabouts, they're simply practical safety measures to make sure you're not calling your drug dealer, to make sure that you're not back at your old spot. You know, you're trying to remove mitigating factors to help them get 30 minutes or 3 days worth of getting clean. The
sure.
difference,
and that's not to say I have to, like, put a little caveat into this. That's not to say that the adult treatment industry doesn't have its own major faults. Absolutely.
Right.
But
nothing is
nothing
perfect.
like
nothing. The world is
your experiences were. Like, what led you to be transported there in the first place?
It's actually kind of a laughable at this moment. It's kind of funny.
Okay.
And I want to just say for the record, my parents, they are good people. They were highly educated. They did their homework. They visited many different places. And so this wasn't just like, yeah, that sounds good, off you go. They, and you'll know why that's relevant in a moment.
Sure. And before you go on, again, I also want to say that I'm not blaming parents. I think oftentimes, especially after the fact, when people see kind of what their children have been put through, there's a lot of shame and guilt kind of that gets laid on them.
Yeah.
And so they're often reluctant to speak out because, oh my God, what have I done to my kid? Like, what, you know, and that's
right. And
it can be embarrassing,
also,
you know.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, I have a lot of empathy I'm a mother myself, so I can empathize certainly with parents. No parent wants to feel that they made a bad decision with a bad
Right.
outcome. But
Right.
but I do believe that there were some parents that had good intentions. But I think if my parents had not been in such of a crisis, they would have been able to step back a little and look at it from 40,000 feet and say, this probably isn't what it is. But again,
Sure.
I was sent away in the 90s. So September 28th, 1994. I get popped and I end up, at the program, the family, foundation school that I was sent to. And the word school is misleading. I'll get back to that. Back it up a couple of years. From an earlier age, I had been molested by a family member. By the time I was 12, I was experiencing a great deal of anxiety that I did not understand. I didn't have the language to express it. My anxiety turned into a lot of anger and outbursts. I had not done drugs. I had not drank. I wasn't that kid, okay? I was getting bullied at school. I was having anxiety. My grades sucked because I really didn't care about school. I didn't really want to be there in the first place. I didn't have a lot of friends, and the only, quote, friends that I could find were like, every junior high has that group of misfits. It was grunge era. Nirvana was really popular, and so I started to mimic, and, no one knows who you are, so I started to wear the flannel shirt around my waist and, paint my fingernails black. And I was just trying to fit in desperately. It's so pathetic. It was so pathetic.
That sounds pretty typical. Really?
Yeah, I was a typical teenager. Did I run away a couple times? Yeah, because that's what everybody else was doing. And I was running away to meet up with boys because I was a tomboy from the start. I was running, and when I say run away, I wasn't like on the lam, okay? Like running away meant I jumped out a window and I was out for a couple hours. I had a BMX bike, okay? And I would hang out with these boys that rode skateboards that I had a crush on every single one of them. And they were super cool, and I felt like I was cool because I was just around them. Okay.
Right.
I was not
stuff that's glorified in movies, by the way. Stuff that is absolutely 100%.
Okay.
This is what a teenager is. This is what they do.
Right.
They're defiant. They don't listen. They don't like school. They want to hang out with the cool kids. All of that.
Yeah, I just wanted to be cool. And so, it's like so sad. So I, at school, I was not having a lot of outbursts there. I mean, school, I was very quiet and invisible. But at home, my anger and anxiety was like exploding. So I was I was a teenager that was throwing stuff, swearing at my parents, I was, I was acting out like, God help me. And I was different, okay? And I was a wild horse that they could not tame. So meanwhile, now in 1994, the war on drugs was like huge. There were all those commercials. This is your brain on drugs. Like, that mom, like, I found pot in my son's room. Like, it was everywhere. So socially and in society, my parents were getting these warning signs like, is your child running away? Are they acting out at home? Are they defiant? Like, yeah, I'm a teenager. That's what I'm supposed to do. So I hadn't had sex. I did not have a boyfriend. I didn't, I hadn't done any of the I guess, typical, I didn't get a chance to even get to that level. Okay. I was that uncool. So, so my parents took me to a psychiatrist. Because they don't know what to do with me, and the psychiatrist says, okay, we'll do some testing. So guess what, okay? It was the 90s. I get diagnosed with ADHD with every other kid that I knew at the time. Yeah. And so the recommendation was made like, okay, well, she's having angry outbursts. She's impulsive, okay, which I was. I had anxiety. I had some weird stuff going on in my head. I was peculiar, okay? I was just different, all right? I did not conform to the white suburban family. I was like the picture. I photobombed their life, basically. And so they were instructed that the best for me would be to find a highly structured, okay, school, away from all of these horrible, horrible things that I was going to end up pregnant or on drugs or in jail, okay? You know, I was 15, all right? You know, I had flaming red hair. I was fat. Like, I wasn't cool, but I wanted to be. So it was a perfect storm of professionals telling my parents, like, if you want to save her, you've got to send her somewhere, okay? Because you know, I had an older family member who had experience and struggled with drugs. So my whole family was like, oh my gosh, you know, she's going to become this, you know, and it was a big family problem. So I get popped, and then I end up in the middle of nowhere. It took me about a year to even figure out that I was still actually in the state of New York.
Oh, wow. So you were really in the middle of nowhere, right?
For sure. I mean, these places couldn't exist, most of them, if, you know, they want to be as far away from people as possible because no one wants to hear us screaming in the middle of the night.
Right.
So,
and that's also to prevent escape, too.
Oh, it worked. I was the worst.
Right.
I ran away a lot. I was really bad at it. You know, I didn't have an iPhone, so Siri wasn't helping me out, you know.
No GPS, right? You just
no, you know. So I got dumped smack dead, surrounded by like 80 acres of heavy woodlands around me. And I had fallen asleep during my transport, so I literally like missed the boat, okay? I didn't even know where we were. We had no calendars, we had no clocks, we had no television, no radio, no outside, no current events. Our mail was censored in and out. Most of it was redacted, unbeknownst to our knowledge. Every communication with our family was monitored. So if I earned a 5-minute phone call with my parents, there was a staff member over my head or on the other line. So, and my parents were also told, she's going to ask to come home. She's going to tell you that we're hurting her. She's going to tell you these crazy things like we're wrapping her in blankets. All the kids say that it's not true. She's going to manipulate you. So if she does say those things, let us know and we'll correct that behavior. Okay? So there was no room for asking for any kind of help.
Right. That's very clever to admit up front the things that you're doing as a way of disguising what it is that you're doing.
Exactly. So they were groups.
That's pretty sneaky.
It's sneaky, but it worked, and they were the masters. Like they took a master class in manipulation. They did, and they knew, and they were in like a test kitchen formulating. Because think about it, the staff ratio to us wasn't that great. So how do you keep kids from snitching on you? You scare them, and you basically block them. Like on Facebook, they just blocked my parents from knowing the truth, so they couldn't see my feed, which would have been screaming, "Help me!" Like they're really hurting me. So
right, if that had existed.
Exactly, that's what would have happened.
Sure.
So they kept us very isolated, and we had no contact with the outside world, and they were brutal. This program, you know, when I got there, I was number 52. It was a rotating cycle, but there was only 50 of us at this program when I arrived in 1994. I left in 97. Maybe there was 70 to 100 kids. And then the 2000s, they financially exploded and ended up with 300 plus students. So, yeah, so they kind of grew an empire. So my stay there was extremely violent. It was a Lord of the Flies. We were in the same building all day long. Any moment you could be stopped for anything, looking at the floor, not looking at the floor. And the rules changed every day. So it was a world of absolute unpredictability, which is exactly what they wanted. It was completely by design. We were publicly humiliated. They had extracted from me that I had been molested as a child, which, you know, I was repeatedly stood up and called a whore, and that I wanted it, and that I liked it, and that I was a sexual deviant even as a child. My parents regretted me even being born. You know, like they heard everything. I mean, they told me everything. And they would mess with me and they would say, "Oh, your mom called today." And I'd say, "Oh, really? Oh, yeah, they were calling. They're on a cruise. She was just calling to check in to see how you're doing." they're with your brother and your sister and they're having a great time.
Oh, wow.
My parents never went on a cruise, okay? But these are the things that they would tell us, and we had no way to reality check what we were learning.
Right.
And so, yes, they were wrapping us in blankets and duct tape. Yes, they would feed me like a dog. They would sit us in corners for days. Our food was controlled. Our sleep was controlled. I had no self-autonomy and no ability to make any decisions on my own. None.
So this is kind of ironic in the sense that, so they've been sold a glossy brochure about how, oh, your daughter's on the edge, she's in trouble, we can help straighten her out and get her on the right path, and then you're put in a situation that's completely isolated from the quote-unquote real world, and it continually, like, baffles me. And I know the reason. It's because it's a big money-making operation. But
right.
The idea that you can be put into these situations, as you're describing, in order to learn how to operate in the world, really doesn't make any sense, because that's not how the world operates. Like, if you try these tactics out in the world with people, you would either get punched in the face or shunned or ignored. Nobody would tolerate that.
No,
you can't just come up to someone and demand or dress them down and tell them all their faults, and that, or your perception of all their faults, and have them behave, so to speak. It's so strange.
Really, well, it's actually it's strange, but it's actually they are the industry, the ones that run these programs. I call them evil geniuses, because the brochures would say things like, "Is your child having difficulty in school? Are they hanging around with bad friends? Are you afraid that they are going to start trying drugs? Are they using drugs? Are they coming home from school late? Are they being defiant? Are they being sassy at home?" Like, they were literally like a hook, line, and sinkering. Like, basically what they should have said is, "Do you have a teenager that's acting out?" Yes.
Do you have a teenager? Period.
Right. I mean, look, but not every teenager, I mean, I knew a couple nerds, like, I didn't get that, but, but they were marketing to, "Is your teenager acting like a teenager? We can help." That's what they were saying. But they marketed it in such a way that it was this illusion, and so all they wanted, I'm not worth anything if I'm getting better. They didn't care if I got better. They didn't care about me learning social skills. They had no interest in what would happen to me afterwards. I was just a number, in a pool of sheep that they were cattling around and prodding us all day long, banking the money.
I think quite to the contrary. Not only did they not care, they weren't doing anything to facilitate anybody getting quote unquote better at all.
Why would they? Why would they? Because if we got well, then we leave, and then they don't make any money. And so, the people they were attracting, okay, and I've said it in some videos that I've done, they weren't polling for people from Harvard or tenured professors or highly educated behavioral specialists. They were picking from the bottom of the barrel, okay? They were picking from adults that were basically still teenagers, but they gave them power, and they gave them the ability to, in a very sociopathic way with a deep-rooted sense of pathology, they allowed adults to come in and transfer any of their pain and their problems onto us. Like, we were emotional dumping grounds, punching bags for their problems. So It was this very cyclical system, and it's not uncommon. Are there some adults that entered into employment at these programs with well-intentions to help children? Yes, but they were very quickly radicalized to the point where when you're put, it's like a groupthink mentality. You are rewarded for your aggressive. The more aggressive and the more you demonstrated the ability to break us and burn us to the ground, the more accolades you received that you were doing it for our own good and that you were willing to cross that line in order to save us. So,
sure, and it's not just that. I mean, when you're coupling that kind of quote unquote power with employment, you know, people get caught up in jobs that they don't like or would prefer not to have all the time, and yet they don't quit because it's paying their light bill and it's feeding their kids.
More than that, my program started moving staff in and providing double-wide trailers and started providing them homes for their families. And they started providing them, you know, it's like we were all property of the owners of this program, staff and students, okay?
Sure.
We were owned, they were our handlers. So, and if you look at, and I've looked demographically, I've done a lot of research on where these programs choose to locate. They generally go to they pull their students or children from highly affluent areas, and then they move the programs to very desolate, very challenged socioeconomic areas so that they become the largest employer, and they have plenty of bankroll to pay for the staff to come be and work there. So
right. I was looking up some of this stuff myself. There are a few states that don't allow corporal punishment in public or private schools. I think Iowa is one of them, and I believe that Massachusetts is another state. So I was looking up therapeutic boarding schools just online, a search.
Sure.
Massachusetts therapeutic boarding schools, and there are a bunch of ads for tailored and targeted to that state, and then immediately, as you read down the ad, it explains that these programs are for kids in the state, but we're going to send you to Utah.
Exactly.
You know, and the reason is that isn't really disclosed. It's because in that particular state, we can't do the things that we want to do to your kid here. So we're going to move them over there, and it's presented as being beneficial because we're moving you away from your environment. But what's really going on is we're moving you to a place that we can brutalize you.
Right, and that's why I use the word human trafficking, because that's exactly what the system is. It's a large-scale, under-the-radar system to humanly traffic children through programs, and one program will refer to another program. Like, they're all in it together. Like, they're not, everyone looks at each program like they stand alone, but they are part of a largely a systemic virus that our country has adopted and are, you know, it's like they're offering a vaccine to bad behavior, and they're all in on the secret that it's not what you think, you know. So it's a very defunct system. So my time there was an extreme. I was, you know, I have symptoms. You know, I suffer from complex PTSD. I was held a hostage, held captive, isolated. Forced confessions. I mean, they did everything but waterboard me, basically, and so they had total control. By the time I left, okay, and I'm a therapist myself, and I can look back on this now and say, wow, they knew what they were doing, because by the time I left, for at least a year afterwards, I still believed truly that they could still read my mind and that they knew my thoughts. And I believed that they could influence me even if I was not in their presence. That is how strongly I was imprinted. And as children, our brains aren't done wiring yet. So we got rewired. Like, our fuses blow differently than someone who had not been exposed to a prolonged trauma. We have our brains develop different pathways to make room for, you know, basically we lived off of adrenaline, which excluded that prolonged exposure of adrenaline and cortisol. Our brains were programmed not to generate serotonin or endorphins or dopamine. Like, our brains biologically were changed. And not to get all nerdy for a minute, I'm just going to take this chance just for a second so that people understand the biology is that The hippocampus and the amygdala in the brain, those are like the control centers. Like if it was an airport, it dispatches airplanes to safe for takeoff, land, sit on the runway. It gives distinct life-saving commands. Our brains were rewired that we were in crisis mode constantly, and even after leaving the program, there's no kill switch for it because the pathways, even on a molecular level, the adrenaline and cortisol molecules are bigger than serotonin or dopamine. So the feel-good or the regulating hormones and chemicals in our brain, they weren't able to get around these roadblocks that these programs, like it's like a tattoo in our brain. So many leave the program not being able to feel good or not be able to experience true happiness because our brains were designed not to permit that. So it was like it whited out all of the opportunities for us to have self-esteem and self-worth and self-identity. So it doesn't surprise me that many left, and I experimented with drugs. I tried everything I could to feel better.
Right, after the fact. Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah. You know, so, but the world looks at us like, oh, well, they were troubled before, so no, you know, duh. But on a biological level.
Exactly. It's kind of what I was saying earlier. And I don't know if this is part of what we're recording, but the idea that when these young adults leave these programs, the programs can point to them, and I know they don't do tracking of outcomes.
No, they don't want that. They definitely don't want that.
But they can look at individuals. They can look at individuals, though, who pop up on their radar and say, oh, look at this person. They are now a success because of what they've been through, when it's really more of survivorship. You know,
right. Well,
you made it through it and somehow overcame what you had been through.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's what I'll tell you. I'll give you an example, okay? So I barely make it through college, okay? Barely. I had very limited skills. The schooling, quotes, okay, big quotes, eyes rolling around my head, schooling that I received. You know, I could have done that with crayons, okay? So I was unprepared for college by the time I made it there, which was not an immediate, you know, I bombed out of my first college because I hid in my room for a year because I didn't know how to even get to or use a cafeteria. I think I went without eating for like 10, 11 days because I was terrified to try and eat because I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to get food that wasn't put in front of me. So, so you fast forward, right? They would say, oh, look at Liz. She's a therapist and she has a private practice and I worked for the government and I've held a lot of very reputable jobs. I built a career. I have a family. I blah, 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 blah. Okay. But here's the bottom line. What they don't look at is that I've been married, I've been divorced twice. I'm married 3 times. When I went back to graduate school, every single day, like every survivor, hear me clearly, okay, I would pull into the parking lot at Fordham and, you know, I made it through college, okay, bonus. I would have panic attacks in my car where sometimes I would miss class because I couldn't get out of my car to get in there to do what I needed to do, that I was still suffering. I would sit in class and I would start sweating profusely for no reason other than I did not, in school, you have to raise your hand to be called on. Well, that was a problem for me because in the program, our version of motivating, like in straight, that motivation technique, raising our hand was the same premise. So I had a hard time, and all of my teachers would write that I'm not engaging enough in class because I couldn't raise my hand, and I was terrified when others would start raising their hand because they knew the answer. I'm in school. I'm 10, 11, 12 years out of the program, and I still feel like I'm right back in there. I didn't do well in group. I couldn't work on group projects. I would have to go to the teachers, okay? And I graduated with a 3.9 miraculously. But I'm proud of that, and it wasn't because I'm smart. I figured out how to work the system. If you do this, these are the results that you get. And so I had a very hard time, you know. So on the outside, sure, I've got degrees out my ass. Okay, I have alphabet soup behind my name. I went on to become a police instructor. I was awarded a congressional award for program development while I was working with the VA and the DOD. I did some epic shit. But what they don't see is that behind that facade, I have crippling anxiety. I suffer from OCD, I hate you. Okay, like you are a terrorist with an AK in my brain. Thank you so much. Get out. I suffer from massive panic attacks, and I've struggled. So they want to point like, oh, well, look what she did. But if they spent a day in my head, they would most certainly look for the way out. Okay.
Right.
And so
And this kind of leads to the people who, for lack of a better words, have not succeeded, and it also goes to kind of what the New York Times profile was all about. These people who went through these programs who decided that they couldn't handle living anymore.
Right. Well,
there's
we
that
were still
side of
dying.
it too. Right.
Well, I would say it a different way. We couldn't. The people who have taken their own lives for whatever reason, for like straight suicide. It wasn't that they couldn't handle living anymore. They couldn't handle dying, because when you're in that space, you're dying every day. So to wake up again and feel that way, if we were living, we wouldn't be killing ourselves. Okay, if we were living in that happiness and stable relationships and felt loved or felt like we deserved to be loved, we wouldn't be killing ourselves. You know what I'm saying?
And,
like we would.
Right. No, I do get that. And there are thousands of those programs that are, they're still in operation. Unlike the family. Is that what it was called?
They changed their names like 5 times. When I was there, it was the family. At the end,
well, that's common too. That name change is common too. But there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of these places still in operation. The story of over 100 people dying after the fact is not uncommon, but
not at all.
It's not something that's on anyone's radar maybe until now.
Until now.
And so it's so important that this be known that this is the true effect that these programs have on people. They die. And I just want to, impart how tragic this all is, and unnecessary.
And sure, are there kids that left? Yeah, I mean, if kids, of course, there's always going to be, a sample of those who left the program. And, and here's what I'm going to say to that. And I've gotten a lot of lashing back, but I'm really trying to, help put some logic to this. If you take someone that, yes, we were all troubled. Okay, yeah, I was a teenager, but I had issues. Okay, let's just call it for what it is. I get put into an extremely, extremely prolonged exposure to trauma beyond what, nail salons have more regulation than what we went through, okay? And then you launch this person. If we were or weren't troubled before, I think not that it's irrelevant, but it kind of falls into the background, because if we weren't or were, the volume went up to 11, and so we were the trauma was it took over who we were, and we lost our sense of self. So to me, or to the survivors, it's not like a no-brainer, well, yeah, you're going to go out there and use, and yeah, you're going to go out there and get high, and unfortunately you're going to overdose or get tangled up, because now you're running from a new trauma, okay? So from the outside world looking in, oh, well, these kids are bad in the first place, so no surprise they ended up back on the drugs. But in a way, we were set up, okay? And I'm not, again, yes, there are always going to be situations where that wasn't the case. We all made our own decisions, okay? Everyone made that first decision to use or relapse or whatever, okay? And addiction is a nasty, dirty bitch, okay? So you're not playing around with a friend sure, I'll come out tonight. No one wants to relapse. No one wants to overdose. No one wants to be back on drugs. Ask anybody that got sober, was that fun? But no one says, fuck yeah, that was the best thing ever. Said no one ever.
Right.
So you basically launch these kids who are now in adult bodies with 15, 16-year-old brains that have been rewired, that are not firing properly, and we had to make our own endorphins. We had to generate our own comfort and numbness because the pain that we were left with was so disorienting that from where we're looking at it as survivors, I understand. I get it. I tried. Like, I tried to be a drug addict. I just wasn't good at it. I didn't like
right.
feeling out of control.
And to your point,
I tried.
Right. And to your point, you
did.
were just talking about, 10, 11 years after you left, you still weren't able to really reasonably function in your own head. You may have been able to present yourself to the world as someone who had a grip on things, but it took 20 minutes in your car sobbing or whatever the case was.
Yeah, hyperventilating,
get
inhalers
the courage
the whole thing.
to raise your hand, so I mean, it really, your testimony really gives a good example of how difficult it really is for many people, including yourself, to overcome the abuse that you went through in the program, to be able to actually get back out into the world, because, like I said, they aren't helping, they aren't teaching, they aren't providing therapy, which is kind of what their stated goal is, but it's not true. And
it's not true. And as a therapist,
and if it was true, these people would not be going through this stuff and ODing and dying. Like, it just wouldn't happen, because that's not what the outcome of therapy is.
Right. I mean, and again, I go back to it for all you haters out there who are going to send me more hate mail and more death threats, like, come at me. But what I'm saying is that it's more likely than not that this trauma that we went through changed the game. So you take someone like me that had no drug history or alcohol history, and I leave, and by the time I left, I believed I was a drug addict. I did believe that I was an alcoholic. I did believe that if I didn't work their program, which they radicalized AA, that I was surely going to die. So I was like, well, might as well. And so I, with all of my might, tried to smoke cigarettes and get drunk and get high, and anything I could find, I tried, because I was like, well, I got to get away from this, And I've always said I left the program, but that program never left me. And so it's, even though you're that far out, it and again, just going back to, like, my experience of what you look like, I don't know if other survivors, I've heard similar things, but we had to learn, in order to get to the next level, or whatever the program language was, or to become a senior member, or to have any kind of power, or you had to give the illusion that you had your shit together, that you bought it, that you were drinking the Kool-Aid. So you had to learn how to present that you were okay when you were not okay. And so I would simply mimicked what I learned in the program in real life. Look okay, get married, have kids, buy a house, get a job, go to college, be something. I didn't go to school because I cared. I didn't go to school. Look, I'll be honest, sweetheart. The only reason I ended up in social work in the beginning, I had no intentions of being a therapist. I had to go to a college and say, about that. I don't have really good skills. I have an 8th grade level education in math, okay? I knew that for college, there were core classes that I knew I wouldn't be able to do. I said, what major can I pick that has the least amount of math and biology? And she said, social work. I had to go home and on Netscape, Netscape, I'm throwing it back. I had to get online and try and figure out what I just signed up for. And as I got through some classes and learned about, having strengths perspective and what social work, our ethics were about, I felt that I had an opportunity to make a difference. I didn't know how, but I figured I was trying to help myself at that point more than anything else.
I'm sure I'm sure it was kind of a surprise when you finally realized kind of what field you were getting into, like the idea that, oh my gosh, this is exactly the opposite from what I just went through.
Right. And what happened to me, and this is what happened. So I'm in college, And I had a total mental breakdown sophomore year because I realized that everything that I was told what therapy was wrong.
Right.
And,
yeah,
it hit me
wow.
that that's not what, like, that's not how it's done. And I think I just, like, I got, like, I felt, it was like I felt like I had been raped, emotionally and mentally. And it really, I felt so violated that I had this, like, moment of when I realized when I'm reading about therapy and what it's really about and what social work really stands for, I was so, I really was in, like, absolute despair to discover that this is not what I got. And so it drove me even harder, to do that, and in the meantime, afterwards, again, looking from the outside, I started working in EMS. I said, well, I will find a job. Drugs didn't make me feel any better because I felt really out of control. So I turned towards emergency medicine and working, with medics and EMS, because I could physically save someone's life and I could pull some tricks and magic, and I had tools that would hopefully positively impact someone's ability to be able to live even though I felt like I was dying. So I was trying to mitigate
Sure.
Yeah, I was
that
trying
kind of
to mitigate.
immediate help. Like you realized and found something that you could do that would actually instantly help somebody. Like in that moment, in that moment of crisis, that moment of trauma, that you could provide assistance physically, emotionally, right then.
And EMS raised me. It taught me how to be compassionate under horrible situations. It taught me that that I could feel empathy for families, especially if like their child had just died or a parent died, or like the traumas and the people that witnessed it or lived through it. It raised me emotionally, and it was very comforting because I could put on a uniform and look like everybody else. I didn't stand out. And I could drive at 110 miles an hour because somebody called me, somebody wanted me. Even though it was under screwed up circumstances, it made me feel like I had some kind of worth and that I had a purpose. So EMS was raising
because that's true.
Yeah, it is true. Like you don't call me for a good time, okay? You call me when it hit the fan. Like nobody calls and say, "Hey, how's it going?" And so I was meeting people, and I was the midnight medic. So I was meeting people in the dark, which is where I lived. I chose to work at night because I felt I could be more invisible. And the night has always been very calming for me. And so I could meet people in their darkest hour in the dark, and I could bring them a little bit of light or hope that they might make it, or that I'm going to do my best to make sure that their loved one or friend doesn't die today.
So, exactly. So that actually leads me to kind of the final portion of what we're talking about, and that is, now we may not have any answers here, but I'd like to pose the question anyway. What can be done, differently? What's the alternative? What should frazzled parents of defiant teens, what should they be looking for? Who should they turn to out of the closed loop of their family when they are seeking help for their perhaps truly troubled teen?
Okay.
Yeah, what's the alternative?
Yeah, I mean,
leave them alone?
No.
Let them be teenagers?
Look,
encourage communication? Sure.
Alternative, or what's the alternative, is kind of like a very misleading kind of connotation. What it is you have to look at your options. And again, this is very individualized. Every parent, I'm a parent and I have baggage, emotional baggage. Like I have a whole baggage claim.
I think that's key. Like you just hit on something. It is very individualized. One size does not fit all.
No, it does not.
A big boarding school in the middle of nowhere where everything is homogenized and coercive and institutionalized isn't the answer. So
Right.
there are, you're right. There are individual remedies for each person who's going through whatever they're going through.
Right. I mean, you have to, number one, you have to, as a parent with a child in crisis, you have to pay attention, okay? You have to look, do not start making decisions when it gets real, okay? Do not, pay attention. And parents, it's our duty to be able to, and now we're, survivors now, many of us are parents, so my hope, that we'll do things a little differently. And for, we're kind of, the baby boomers are kind of out of the mix as they're not the ones sending their kids away as much anymore. At this point, parents, one, need to be able to, within themselves, be able to see their child and recognize that it's possible that they're actually suffering and that they're not just being defiant, that maybe there's something else behind it. Placement should be the last option, unless it's a detox or a medical crisis. If it's medically driven, that's a whole other route to take.
Or criminal, right? I mean, there are pathways for each of these issues that reasonably can be followed. If your child is on drugs, there are pathways to remedy that. If your
you want to
child
mitigate
is,
it. If you're in the middle of a crisis, you have to mitigate it, and you have to learn to prioritize. Is this a medical issue? Is this a mental health issue? Is this a family issue? And the parents have to be willing that maybe they're part of the problem and they need to get part of the solution. There has to be an open dialogue.
And I think what else is important is that any decision that a parent is choosing to make regarding their child, there should be transparent buy-in. I guess it would be the best. I don't know if it's the best phrase, but the child should be part of that decision.
Absolutely.
There should be, like you were saying, there should be dialogue between the parent and child and others, perhaps, about what happens next, and or what do you think you need, or let's investigate this together, kind of a thing, instead of
and look, teenagers are not going to say, "Oh, thanks for asking, Mom. I think I want to go to rehab." And, take my phone, get me off Insta. I don't want to use Snapchat. You have to frame it. You need to be able to find a way to get your child to a professional that specializes in your child's age group, and you need to get them to, and you have to do your homework, okay? And get them to, if you believe that they need professional help, let the professional help your child, but don't allow the professional to drive the bus for you as a parent. You know your child best, or as best as you can. Give your child a chance and see how, if you have a good therapist and that child has a good connection, that is a very viable option. And parents, I always say too, in this day and age of information, ignorance is a choice, okay? So you can do your homework, and my parents did their homework, but again, they were doing it without the internet. They were doing it by word of mouth. There was no Google. There was no Yelp, okay? There was none of that. And so parents need to recognize that each child has individual needs, and that the family itself may have a sickness within them, that the dynamic is skewed. So, I mean, there's really, I can't say do this or do that, but get to the right professional or seek out someone like me that specializes in this area. And especially with adolescents, you want someone that your child feels connected to. And you have to respect their privacy, and you have to respect that they're going to be working with someone and support them in that. And parents need to, especially if they're on drugs or they're going balls to the wall, you do what you have to do to mitigate that and end that nonsense right then and there, because they could die. Okay, that's a life-saving measure. But you have to start as parents, do your research. It's like a term paper that it's due. don't pull the all-nighter to get that paper done because you're going to turn in a really crappy paper.
Right. Because it's like you were saying, don't make decisions in the midst of immediate crisis because you're not going to be thinking clearly. You're going to make hasty decisions and you're also very vulnerable and prone to believe the first best thing that you hear, which may be a glossy brochure from one of these so-called schools, and these people, they're trained to react to folks in these kinds of situations and make sure that they understand that don't worry, everything's going to be taken care of.
And you don't want a program. If they can do an assessment, I love this. I call programs all the time, and I actually record the phone calls. I call and say I have a fictitious child. I have a 15-year-old boy that's been running away, and I think he's on. I use the words "the drugs," okay, because that's an old term. They love it.
Sure.
And they say, "Oh, well, how soon would you like to place him?" I say, "Well, he's got to get out of my house because he's doing drugs, and I don't want it here." "Oh, well, we can have him in within 24 hours. If you send us your insurance information, we will overnight you a package, sign the consent. Do you need a transport agency? Do you need this? Do you need that?" They offer you a one-stop shopping. It's like going to Walmart. You can get anything up at Walmart. And if they start talking like that to you, hang up the phone, okay?
Yeah.
Hang up.
Yeah.
If they start saying, like, your child's going to die, act now, like, get on it. You only have, days, they could be dead tomorrow. If you're starting to feel scared and pressured, hang up the phone. Just hang up on them. Don't even let them get that further into your head. You want a program that says, okay, well, first of all, before we know anything else, is your child in the treatment of a professional? Yes or no? If they are, can you release those records to us so our team can review to make sure that we are an appropriate fit for the needs that your child has? Can we speak with that therapist? We would like to meet with you individually, and we'd also like to meet with your child individually. Parents put more effort into searching and visiting colleges than they do turning over a minor to a program that they know nothing about.
Right. One of the podcasts that Alexi and I did a few months ago were the top 10 red flags to be aware of when you're looking for an ethical, good drug treatment facility. The first one being make sure that the place on the website, for instance, is actually the place that you're going. Number 2 is make sure that the phone call that you're making is actually connected to the place that you're going. The third and perhaps most important was what are the licenses and certifications of the people who would be treating you? Like what are their credentials? Who are they? Who are the owners? Who actually runs this? Are they also certified in their field?
And here's another one.
Yeah.
I just want to highlight this one. I call it the broad spectrum syndrome. If their program claims that they will take your child if they are a liar or hooked on heroin, walk away. Because
it's too broad.
It's too broad, and it sounds too good to be true. And if it looks pretty online, it probably is. What I tell parents, if you are dead ass about getting the best help for your child, book those plane tickets, get on a plane, rent a car, and drive up there unannounced.
There you go.
Like to show up. Shut up. If you want the best for your kid, then you have to man up too, and you have to show up and kind of get tough. And you are there to interrogate them. Interrogate them before they start interrogating your child when you're not there.
Right.
Like,
Exactly. You know what I haven't found yet? I haven't found, and this kind of puts a point on it. I have not found one of these so-called therapeutic boarding schools, wilderness camps, that is good. Like I haven't found.
Well,
I
we
have
only know
not
the
found
outcome.
one. You know, I haven't found one that I haven't heard. And I've talked to many people thus far from all over the country. And the stories always seem to be so similar because
Right, it's the same theme,
they're run in the same
model.
manner. And I have not found yet, and I'm looking.
I'm
I
looking
haven't
too.
found
I'm looking for.
I
I'm
haven't
to
found
start
a
my
place
own.
that, you know, so big red flags, like regarding the whole industry, you know, be very wary of anybody who's trying to sell you anything regarding your child, especially when it comes to therapeutic services.
And you have to,
and even more so when they're trying to take your child away from you for whatever reason. Like that just doesn't seem to be a good choice.
No, it's not okay. If there are peer reinforcements, like if peers are allowed to reinforce your child's behavior, flag. If they cut you off from communication and mail and all that, get out of there. You know, you want a place that's going to enhance and enrich your child's experience. Don't, you know, picture your child as that, you know, I mean, I'm a working mom, you know, I work for myself, but I had to hire a nanny recently, and I've done the daycare routine with my older kids. I went to the daycares like a ninja, okay? Like, I'm going to leave the most precious little thing with you. Somehow they give the impression that because you're a teenager and you're unruly, somehow the ball gets dropped, you know? Like, I'm not going to leave my 6-month-old with some, you know, some rinky-dink program in the middle of nowhere where I can't call or show up to check on my baby. Parents
that was my experience, by the way. That was me. I wasn't in a program, but I was in a preschool that was really mean. And the remedy was my mom finding out about me being locked in a closet, and I was told that if you, like a 3 and 4 year old misbehaving, the solution, the punishment was lock you in a closet and tell you that if you moved or made noise, a mean rat would come out and bite you. And
that won't mess you up or anything. Yeah.
We were hot sauced. You know, if you didn't comply or didn't do the right thing, you were made to drink a thimble of hot sauce. And finally, I guess I started acting weird. You know, strangely enough.
I mean,
my mom investigated a bit and got me to kind of tell her what was going on, and the remedy there was she removed me from the situation, and that's good, but in this day and age, in these situations, it's not quite enough. And that's the whole point of this, is to not just speak to the closed group of survivors, but to get this message out much more broadly to a new audience, to people who have no kids, for instance, like who just care about the welfare of children, because everyone is affected by this. Everyone is affected. There are people out in the world, like you and I, like other people who have been through trauma, who are not willing, for whatever reason, usually because they don't think the other person will understand, or they'll be considered complaining, or they just feel too much shame about expressing what they've been through to others. But the whole population is affected because we walk among you, right? You know, these people who've been through this brutality, they're out there in the world. They're your neighbors, they're your friends, they're your family members. And that's why I'm doing this, is to spread the message that this kind of thing needs to be stopped. So I would encourage others to, if they're willing to come forward, you can, like a few people have, remain anonymous even, because I know that this is sometimes really difficult to to talk about.
Yeah, it's
but,
okay. It's okay.
That's the whole point, is to
and
get this out.
And the whole, and just to kind of wrap up on my end here, the I See You Survivor campaign that there's a page, you can just look it up on Facebook. The whole premise of that started with me making a very short video letting the world know that I'm human, that I might look like I walk among you, but that I suffer too, because I was getting pissed that people were like, oh, you're such a badass. I'm like, these people have no clue. Like, I melt down all the time. Like, I lay at night sometimes and I cry because I'm so overwhelmed. Like, I'm human. So I was like, fine, I'm going to just get like emotionally naked and show everyone that I'm just like them. The next morning I wake up and my friends were like, hey, congratulations on the campaign. I'm like, what campaign? And people resonated. It was like a total accidental move, you know. And so with the reason the I See You Survivor campaign, the mission, and this is an open invitation, anyone hearing this podcast, a survivor, supporter, just a good human being, okay, or a parent or grandparent, anyone affected, it's a short message that you can, and the video makes it real. The videos people go to, when they're suicidal, they go to this page. When they're feeling down, alone, they go to this page. When they want to get support, they go here and watch people's videos. And the rules are simple. Be authentic. Don't tape it and retape it. We don't want perfect. We want vulnerable and raw, and you can say whatever you want. And that the point is to get on there and say, you can remain anonymous or not or whatever. My name is so-and-so. I'm a supporter. I'm a survivor. I knew someone. I want everyone watching to know, like, this is a little part of my story, or how I'm linked to this systemic, you know, it's a national crisis, you know, of against humanity, against children. And the only requirement is that you have to look into the camera and say to the other survivors that are like me, or to those of you who are still fighting or suffering, I see you. And I want you to see me too. Like, I see you, and I acknowledge and I believe you, and it's validating others' experiences. And this is where the direction I'm trying to go is that we are going to build a network among ourselves so we can heal and see ourselves and other people. Parents are talking to parents on the campaign, kids, survivors, supporters, husbands, wives, grandparents. I'm making a national plea to please, if you have the courage, to make a short video so that we can see that you're real. To make a quick video, send it into the site, and I'll have it posted in 3 hours, and you'll watch the numbers of video counts go up. You're going to get thousands of views, and people respond. I don't permit any bullying. There's no trolling. Everything gets ripped down immediately. It's a safe space. It's very sacred. And not on my watch. Nobody is going to get through. No one gets hurt on my watch. You know, no one's going to suffer. I will protect any and all of you to the death. And so will all of my friends. So,
well said.
I mean, that's kind of where we're going.
And I will provide links to everything you're talking about in the show notes. And we're going to continue to get this message out and provide some real therapy. People who,
and I'm a real
desperately
therapist,
need it.
You know, and my email is going to be posted. I mean, look, if you're listening and you, like, I've had people say, oh, Liz, I don't think you'd want an email from me, or I don't think you want to be my friend. Wrong. No, I want to get to know you. I want you to know your stories. I want to share in that moment. I want to be, you know, don't run away from me. I'm chasing you. I'm trying to help you. Like, stop running. You know, I want to hear from you. I want to know your name. I want to know your story. I don't want you to feel alone. I want you to have a safe place to fall, and I will certainly be that. And I have a team of therapists that work with me. We'll get you to the right person. Like, you know, let me help you get where you have to go, because no one should suffer, and we need to stop dying to live.
Yes, exactly. Well, I think that's, we'll probably wrap it up with that message of hope, because that's the ultimate goal, is to rise above all this and to let people know what's really going on. And I really want to thank you, Liz. Liz Ianelli,
no problem.
For coming on the podcast today. And I really, really appreciate it. We're going to keep fighting.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to keep fighting till the day I die. I wear combat boots year round. I'm going to die with them on. I mean, that's just how, I'm one of those. I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves and get dirty. So.
Thanks, Liz. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.